Hey guys, I'm currently doing a build with the Fairgraves unique bow ignite build, but I don't really like how it functions. So in this video, I'm not going to be focusing on the build video, but I do want to talk about how this functions because this is a bit weird item and it recently got re-enabled after bug fixing, but it still has bugs. This bow is sort of very similar, or at least the skill that it has and how it functions works in a similar way how explosive arrow works in Path of Exile 1. However, this is sort of like an infinitely stacking ignite damage, sort of, if you have very low damage. So here's how this works. This has like two things that can be a bit confusing. This does grant a skill that is Phantasmal Arrow. The Phantasmal Arrow is almost exactly like Explosive Arrow in Path of Exile 1. It hits the target, it leaves a fuse. If it misses, it leaves it on the ground. It is a ground targeted, it leaves a fuse. After a short delay, it explodes, dealing AoE damage and igniting enemies if you have enough, I guess, ignite magnitude. But the second part is all attack hits inflict Spectral Fire for 8 seconds. Now this Spectral Fire is what makes the build feel bad, but I feel like it does have a potential to be great. Now the Spectral Fire, it states that targets affected by Spectral Fire debuff do not take damage from ignites. Instead, the damage feeds the Spectral Fire. When Spectral Fire debuff expires after 8 seconds, or the target dies, the Spectral Fire explodes, dealing all the damage it has absorbed to all enemies within 1.8 meters, including the affected target. So here's the thing about the Spectral Fire. As soon as you hit the enemy first time, the 8 seconds starts ticking. When you hit again, the 8 seconds do not reset. So no matter what, it will trigger after 8 seconds. So you have 8-second window to kind of stack ignite damage. Essentially it's delaying ignite damage. Here's the problem. If you continuously keep attacking, because ignite duration is less than 8 seconds, so you're gonna essentially want to not really stack ignite. Once your first ignite ends, you're gonna apply a new ignite. But if you continuously keep attacking, as soon as the Spectral Fire triggers, you target again with the Spectral Fire, and ignite damage stops dealing damage to enemies and starts ramping up again. You essentially do not deal dot damage to enemies if you continuously keep attacking. There is no indication when the Spectral Fire is about to explode so that you can stop attacking to avoid accidentally triggering Spectral Fire again. From my testings, there is no way to proc it any faster. You can consume ignite, it will not trigger the Spectral Fire, it will just stop the ignite ramp up, and that's it. You can also weapon swap, it will maintain the debuff, ignite will still maintain ramping up. However, that Spectral Fire damage is non-scalable damage, as in it is not affected by player stats. A very easy way to tell that, I didn't even need to make my second character to test that, I didn't realize that, but when you use Black Flame Ring, your regular ignites become different color, they become purple. But once that Spectral Fire happens, that non-scalable damage, when that happens, it becomes a normal ignite color, which means it's not affected by Black Flame anymore, and the enemies are taking fire damage, because with the Black Flame, enemies are taking Chaos damage. You still scale everything as normal fire ignite damage. Your fire damage will scale it. The faster ignites also gonna scale it. However, enemies just take as Chaos damage. So Wither would also be nice for this as a kind of separate idea how to scale it. However, that Spectral Fire, it doesn't get scaled a second time. Now in PoE 2, you can scale ignite damage with hit damage. The higher your hit damage is, and even fire. Well, actually, in this case, fire penetration won't help because I'm using... Actually, I'm not entirely sure. Would fire penetration still work if I'm using Black Flame? Because the initial hit will be stronger. So the fire penetration should help, but then once enemies are taking Chaos damage, then lowering their Chaos resistance would help instead of fire resistance. So it's a bit complicated combined with the Black Flame. But the reason why I even wanted to use Black Flame was to reduce ignite duration, essentially get more damage per second. I can stack more ignites over those 8 seconds. By the way, you can get a corrupted Fairgraves Curse that has either shorter delayed Spectral Fire or longer delayed Spectral Fire. And there are reasons why you may want a longer delay, because that way you can essentially stack shorter duration but strong ignites into one big ignite, which will not be affected by Black Flame Ring, and it will be lasting 4 seconds. 4 seconds is the default ignite duration. This is sort of similar like in Path of Exile 1, where you get very short duration poisons, but once it proliferates, it has default poison duration. That way you essentially want very short but very powerful dots, which then kind of gets reset into one strong dot that has long duration. So this is what I'm trying to do currently, and I will later make a build video. Right now I just started mapping and I'm still uncertain how this is gonna go. But the clear speed is also a bit annoying because it has delayed explosions. You're not really killing enemies with ignites, you're killing enemies with hits, which is really annoying because you need enough hit damage to defeat enemies and start chain reaction. Not really chain reaction, but I'm using Fiery Death support. Has a chance to explode enemies, and that explosion can ignite again, and the explosion is based on enemy life. So it sort of chain reacts and keeps exploding without me doing anything, which is very nice. Because of this delayed explosion, I have to wait. It sort of is like Explosive Auto in PoE 1, but I pretty much never do dot damage. The only time I do dot damage is when I am fighting boss. When I kind of ramp up ignite damage, I can even weapon swap, and I am currently trying to do that, but I'm not sure if it's really worth it, into unique spear that can aggravate ignites. And aggravate means 100% extra damage, which is noticeable. So essentially I ramp up multiple ignites into one bigger ignite. It hits, it ignites enemy with that hit, and then I switch weapons to aggravate that ignite. I would also like to have a refresh ignite duration, but that is a chance on a critical chance. I don't have critical chance, and it's difficult to get enough chance and enough hits during that small window to refresh ignites. That's why I'm also making this video. Maybe some of you have some interesting ideas how you could scale this. Maybe I overlooked some of the mechanics. Maybe there's a better way to refresh ignites other than on criticals. And maybe there's some other skill combination that I could use, because I'm not a big fan of swapping into spear. And then it's kind of made, I chose to use Rapid Assault because it's multi-hit and very quick. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about the build just yet, but I'm doing this as a Titan, so I'm mainly getting Titan for the 50% increased effect of small passive skills. And I took most of the fire nodes and ignite nodes and like faster ignites, but I'm still unsure about my ignite damage. It doesn't feel too great, especially when the Spectral Fire happens. Like the Spectral Fire feels weaker than my initial hits. I can ramp up to like 100,000 ignite damage. I see the 100,000 ignite on the enemy, and then it explodes. It does a lot of damage, but then the ignite damage doesn't feel very good. So I really don't know how else to approach this skill. Just playing basically hit and run. You tag the enemy pack, and then you tag the other enemy pack and keep running around and waiting for the explosions to happen. By the way, the only way to trigger Spectral Fire faster if enemies are dying. And since you cannot really do damage with your ignites until it explodes, the only way to kill enemies is with hits. By the way, the bug, currently it's probably bug. If you have any extra projectiles linked to the skill, it completely destroys the distance. This is the normal distance. It's kind of short distance because the bow has reduced projectile range. If you add any amount of projectiles like normal projectiles or multiple projectile support, this is the distance you can shoot. You lose all the distance. It's pretty much melee distance. And I think this is a bug, because look what happens if I use barrage skill. Now the distance is longer. Let me just use multiple projectiles. If I use multi-shot, look, shooting basically almost at my feet. That's the furthest it shoots. But now if I use barrage skill, look what happens. Now it's shooting a bit further. Even if I aim right next to my feet while the barrage is active, it still shoots further. Even if I remove multiple projectiles, I can aim at the ground where I want it to be shot, right? But if I use barrage skill, now it shoots somewhere else. So it's very inconsistent distance, and that must be a bug, because this doesn't make sense. You cannot modify this weird distance with projectile speed. You cannot modify it with attack speed. The only things that do modify is multiple projectiles and barrage skill, which only affects the amount of projectiles, but the amount of projectiles seem to reduce the range, but the barrage skill increases the range. So this makes zero sense to me. So this must be a bug. So yeah, I'm gonna spend at least 1 or maybe 2 more days leveling this build and playing because I just started mapping level 70 and the playstyle isn't very pleasant to me. I will make a build video, but I don't expect it to be very good unless some of you have some interesting ideas how this could be improved, or maybe I am overlooking some mechanic that could make this, I don't know, more viable. Let me know in the comments below if you got some interesting ideas for this. Thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.